I love, and therefore because I love, the next, it's like ahavti kama ki yishma. I love, and therefore Hashem, now I want you to hear my tefillot. That's approach number one. The second approach is v'od yesh lomar damru zichronam livracha. The Gemara in Baba Kama Dav Tzadi Bet says hamitpalel chavero v'hu tzarich oloto davar hu nanat chila. Right? If a person davens, we know the famous thing, if a person davens for someone else, but you need the same thing, right? Whatever it may be, right? You daven for someone else first. So then that person will, the person who's davening for the other person, the person who's davening, in other words, the Reuven and Shimon. Reuven is davening for Shimon. So since Reuven is davening for Shimon first, Reuven gets answered as well. Right? So he says, Al zen emar ahavti et chaverai kamoni. Right? I love, it's with a similar idea but different approach, but he says, because I love my fellow as myself, itpalalti alav k'mirmasha tzarich afli, and therefore he says, because I daven for him, right? Itpalalti alav b'masha tzarich afli, and I daven for him regarding something that I also need, meaning I put my friend first, right? It's not that I need something and therefore I'm going to daven for my friend. I'm davening for my friend for something that I also need. The way, even the phrasing makes it sound like that. Yishma Hashem Koli. Therefore, he says, Ahavti, right? I love my friend so much that I'm going to daven for them first. Yes, I do need that thing too, but they need it first. So I'm davening for them, and since I daven for them, now he said, Ki Yishma, Ahavti Ki Yishma Koli. So he says, because of this, Hashem will hear my voice. He says that meaning Hashem will help me with the matter that distresses me. Even though I didn't daven for myself, right? I'm stressed out about whatever it may be, but I see that my friend is also stressed out, and so I want to daven for him. And once I daven for him, so the stress that he's going through is the same as mine. I'm davening him first. I love him first. Right? And therefore he says, even though I didn't daven for myself, and even then, the pasuk continues, Hashem will hear my right. So he says Hashem will also respond to that which I prayed for daven for on behalf of my fellow Jew. According to this, the love, the hafti in this pasuk refers to love of a fellow Jew in need, meaning a hafti ki yishma. I love my fellow Jew so much that he's going through something that I happen to need also. I should daven for him first. The point here is what the Zera Shimshon is trying to, in both the cases, in both of the two options or explanations, the Zera Shimshon is using the idea of ahavti to remind us of our obligation to really care for and love other people before ourselves. He's using the idea of ahavti l'recha kamocha. I guess that maybe there's really could be that's the connection between the two, because it is mentioned in this week's parsha. So that is maybe that's the connection. Even though before I said I didn't understand the direct connection, it seems like that makes the most sense. Now there's a third approach, and he says here similar to the first approach, but a little different twist. Right? What happens when I love every Jew the way I love myself? One of the wonderful things I remember, my wife's grandfather, who should be, live long and be healthy. He's 96 right now, so he should continue to be healthy. I remember him that once he was a teacher in high school, and I remember him once, but I never had him. Never had the fortune of was never fortunate to learn in his class. But I remember him telling my kids once that when he was talking about davening at one point, he said, davening is the only thing we almost never use the word I. Any part of davening, almost every part of davening is about we, about us, everything, right? There's never like ani tzarich, ani, right? Except for when you say Elohai, it's Elohai, my God, right? But most of the time it's Hashivenu Avinu L'Toratecha, right? Right? It's even when you say Magen Avraham, it's not Mageni. You say Magen Avraham, it's like the collective, right? Most of davening, almost all of davening, is in the form of a collective. He actually, I remember him once. I think he's told me the story where he said when he used to teach davening, he said, "I want you to write a davening," and what he challenged the kids in the class. I want you to write a tefillah, but you can't use the word I. Don't think about yourself. Only think about what other people need. And most kids had a very difficult time, because when you're davening, you think it's all about me. But it's not about you, because you're only one piece of the puzzle. So your puzzle, you want everyone's puzzle to be successful, because otherwise the puzzle falls apart. So he's saying that was what he was trying to teach us, that davening is not about only you. Yes, your tefillah is important, but you need to be included yourself in everything else that's going on, right? So when you're davening, you have to have in mind these different things that we're saying, right? And again, if you go through tefillah, very rarely will you see the word ani or even when I'm talking, when I'm saying things in tefillah, most of the time there's no reference to the person davening. It's always I'm asking on behalf of other people. So he says, in Cain, ani mispalel kol tefillotai b'lashon rabim. That's why I daven, right? I see if the Gemara in Barachot mentions it. I daven all my tefillot v'az bevadai she'yishma Hashem mikoli. The zchut the rabim adif. So he says the reason why he says ahavti, he says Hashem, I love every Jew. Hashem, I'm including myself with all. I love everyone. I'm including everyone. That's when Hashem. I'm asking Hashem. I'm including myself. Ahavti, I love. Right? I'm accepting the fact. I'm acknowledging the fact that this is something bigger than me, and therefore Hashem will definitely connect. Yishma Hashem tefillah. He will hear my tefillot. Why? Because I'm davening as a community. We're davening together, right? Because of course, as we know, the Gemara in Barachot mentions that it's zchut rabim adif. Zchut rabim is that when we're davening, obviously we could daven individually, but we could also daven with a group, and the davening of the power of the group is much stronger. So he says. So the Gemara in the pasuk in Yeshayahu says the pasuk there says that during the Makkah, there was a plague there, and it says, "Go people, go." It says, "Go b'nei lechami b'chaderecha." Go into your rooms and close your doors behind you. Hide for a brief moment until everything is past. V'kashem ma'aratzal amar chavi kimat rega. Why do we understand? Why does the pasuk say hide for a moment? Right? The Zereshim is asking, who told Yeshayahu that whatever it is that he said, go into your house, close the door, wait a minute, and come back out? Who's to say that Hashem's anger and wrath is going to be only a split second? Who told the Navi that? So he says, Lama hu tzarach lomar kach. Is the intent. Right? Does the kavanah of the pasuk mean that a person who's scared, even though he now goes to hide alone, he should not be worried that he might have to remain there for a long time. Because Hashem's wrath will pass shortly. In other words, the point of what he's saying is that to offer hope. He says, right? He says, I don't understand. Right? If a person goes, if he's scared, the idea is you go into your room for a second, close the door, be by yourself for a second, you'll get hope. That doesn't make sense. He says, I don't understand that. That's against the logic, right? If I'm scared, I want to know that other people are scared too, because that we can all kind of go through it together, right? Why should I go into my room, close the door, and say, okay, take a second, take a deep breath, and come back out. You won't be scared anymore. That doesn't sound like a thing. So he says, Lotein he says, in other words, so he says, however, there's really a problem. To say that people need to be convinced and tell them, oh, you know what, I'm telling you now, go into your room and come back out, everything will be better. It's meant to offer hope. That's what the pasuk is meant to say. But he says, that doesn't offer hope. That offers me less hope, right? Go into your room, close the door, come back out. That doesn't sound like a statement of hope. It's meant to be that, but it's not what it doesn't sound like. So, and that if we're not given this, if there's real trouble, and I didn't give you that statement of hope, if I said there's trouble outside, what's the first thing you're going to do? Run to my room and close the door, make sure that I'm not, I'm protected, right? I'm not doing it because I just told you, go into your room, close the door, and come back out. Everything will be okay afterwards. No, there's trouble outside. I'm going in. So it's meant to do. So he says, "Bitmiya or he says, whatever man has, he would give up for his life. Meaning, a person will ever takes to save his life. So if I know that there's trouble outside, I'm going to do whatever I can do to protect myself. That's go inside, bolt the doors, whatever it is. It doesn't mean that because the Navi said I'm offering you hope, that's the reason why all of a sudden that it can be all better. So he says, the Sefer Dekra Balataretz Kusha Anofelt Aresha. He says that according to the, if you look at the whole pasuk, the end of the pasuk, it comes to explain the beginning of the pasuk. And he says, Mishum Damrina B'Masechet Tanit. We see the Gemara in Tanit says, and Daf Yud Aleph, Bizman Shatzibur Sharui B'Tzar, when a time when the community, when the tzibur is in a moment of distress, Al Yomar Elech Leveti Ochal Veshtar. I shouldn't go rest on my, a person should never say, oh, there's, the community is in distress. I'm going to go to my room and I'll be in my own room. Like I'll stand alone. It doesn't bother me. It's not my community. It's not my problem. Oh, they'll let them deal with it. It's not me. A person should never say that. When the community is in distress, I have to be part of the community. It's not. I can't hide in myself. Right? You should never say Al Yomar Elech Veti Ochal Veshta. I'll go to my house, eat, drink, and be merry. V'Shalom Elech Nafshi. And whatever happens to my soul, that's much better for me than going out and starting to deal with. V'imo Seken. He says, if he does do this and ignores the trouble of the community, Al Yereb Nechamatziyu, he will actually not witness what the nechama that happens to the community. Meaning, a person who says, oh, I see my fellow neighbor or my fellow community in distress, and I don't try to do something or do my little bit, my little part. Rather, he says, I step aside, I go into my house, close the door, and as if nothing is that, put my blinders on. He's not going to see the nechama that happens to that community. He's actually going to merit a lot worse. So he says, it's therefore difficult. So now we can understand. Now he says, my question is, how can the Navi tell someone? How could the Navi tell these Jews? How could the Navi tell the Jews, go into your room, go into your house? The Navi is telling him, go into your house, lock the door. That's the opposite of, if we're all in Tsar, we should be in Tsar together, right? So he says, it seems like the Navi is telling him, go separate yourself from the tzibur, go lock the door. That's why the pasuk later says, hide for a brief moment. Meaning that even though you are temporarily forced to separate yourself, the dever ba'ir kanes raglach, right? He says, when there's a plague in the city, take your feet, meaning stay indoors. We're just about to finish Drush 5 in Kedoshim. So he says that the Navi, why is the Navi saying to everyone to go into their house for a second? He's saying they're not going into the house to separate themselves and kind of remove themselves from the tzibur. They're going into the house. He says, I can go into my house. The Navi told me to go into the house. There's a reason for it. I'm going to the house. I should be davening while I'm in the house. Davening, everyone should be okay. I'm not going in the house to make a sign saying I'm being separating myself. The Navi is telling them, go into your house. There's trouble outside. Go into your house. But that doesn't mean you're going to the house, lock the door, and say, oh, it's only me. I'm protected. Everyone else is not. I'm going to the house. He says, nevertheless, while you're sitting in isolation, right, you should be davening for everyone. And really daven for and hope that every moment you'll see the Yeshua, the salvation. As we know that the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph, it says that the day of judgment, when we reach Shamayim, the first thing we ask for was one of the first things that are asked of us. Did we yearn for the salvation? Did we yearn for Mashiach? The tzipita Yeshua, did you really yearn for it? So when the Navi is saying V'chol dor shelo nivna beit hamikdash b'yamav kilu necharav b'yamav, that's also Gemara in Yerushalmi and Yoma. V'al derech zeh yesh lecha letzapot shemikoach tfilatcha shetitpalel b'chavana gdola talev v'tismach Yeshuat hatzibur. So he's saying how does this connect to the parsha? We'll get to in a second. But he's saying in this part of the Drush, he's saying that ahavti ki yishma. He's saying that based on the Navi in Yeshayahu, the Yeshayahu there says there's trouble outdoors. Go isolate yourself. Now, when it was meant to be a sign of hope. The sign of hope was go close. When I tell you go close your door, that's not a sign of hope. That's a sign of the opposite of hope. He's saying close your door. So he's saying the reason why he's telling him to close the door is, and we know in the Gemara that what the Zerah Shimshon is saying is the Gemara says that anyone who isolates himself from the tzibur, he's not going to see the Yeshua that the tzibur is going to see. So how could it be that the Navi is telling everyone to go close themselves in the door, so they close themselves in a room? So the way the Zerah Shimshon explains it, and we'll get to the connection in a second. The way he explains it is that the Navi is telling him there's trouble outside, go inside. But when you're inside, don't isolate yourself. Right? When you're inside, you're protecting yourself. It's not meant to be hide yourself and stay. You're doing it because there's something going on outside. So you're protecting yourself inside. But while you're inside, what are you doing? right? It's a good example is what were we doing when we were all locked up during COVID, right? Were we there? Many people I know, many people, they said their davening was never better. They never had better davening because they had so much time. There was no rush. Everyone was like, I remember one person. What? Exactly. And I remember recently, was probably a year ago, I went to visit my in-laws, and my in-laws, someone I know from my in-laws community, he has a siddur, a beautiful, like a simple siddur, but the siddur was filled with yellow lines and marks, and I'm like, what's going on here? He said, this is my siddur from COVID. During COVID, he used to sit with daven and learn, and as he was going through it, he would like highlight something and sing a song while he was doing it. He would remind himself. He says, now, when I'm davening regularly at like a normal, or what my old pace, my pre-COVID pace, I hold this siddur just to remind myself what I could be doing. Because he says, like, that's what we should be doing. That's what davening should be. It doesn't always happen to be the case, but he says that's what the point is. He's saying, so the third interpretation is that when we're connecting ourselves to a community, when we connect ourselves to something bigger than us, and the davening that we have is when we say it, the starting of it. I'll go over the whole thing so we can understand. Right in Parshat Kedoshim it says V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What does that mean? So and that was the connection. Even though in the beginning of this, I must admit, I said I don't understand what the connection is, and it came up. Thankfully, Baruch Hashem, it came to me that the idea is that the whole point of this. Of the tefillah, right? We're supposed to start every tefillah with Harei mekabel alai mitzvot aser shel v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? I have an obligation. So in the third one, so the Zera Shimshon, how do we start? We'll review each one of them so we can understand. So he starts by a question that's mentioned in the Gemara about the pasuk in Tehillim that's mentioned Ahavti ki yishma, and most of them in the Gemara there, and the Maharsha and the Rashbam all say that it's not Ahavti, Ahavtani means Hashem, I want you to love me. Because so that you can hear my voice. The Zera Shimshon says, I don't think that's not a literal interpretation of the word ahavti, and he offers three unique interpretations. Each one's pretty short. The first one he says is based on the Arizal, which, as I mentioned, is the Arizal says that before davening we should accept upon ourselves the mitzvah of ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And so when I say the word ahavta l'reacha kamocha, I'm already including myself. Right, I'm already saying I love everyone else. Ahavti is a state of declaration. I love other people. Now he says ki yishma. Now it says ahavti ki yishma. Hashem, I love. Declaration. Pause. Comma. Whatever. Ki yishma et kol tachanai. Now I love Hashem. Now listen to my tefillah. That's the first one. Is I'm including everyone else in it. That's the first option. First interpretation. The second one is that we know that when a person davens for someone else, his tefillot are also answered, right? A person who davens on behalf of a fellow Jew, then he himself will also he is answered first. So we can say that the word ahavti is I love my fellow Jew. It's on a similar kind of direction. I love my fellow Jew, and since I love my fellow Jew, I'm praying on behalf for something that I also need, and because of this, Hashem will hear my voice. Meaning, do I need whatever I need? Sure, but I see that my friend needs it also. I'm going to daven for them first. So I'm saying, ahavti, I love them. I love them, I want them to daven, and therefore, because I'm davening for them, Hashem will hear my voice too. Meaning he's saying that's the second interpretation, ahavti, what the Zera Shimshon is trying, it was bothered by, it seems to me, is that he's bothered by like the way the Gemara and the Maharsha and the Rashbam all interpret the word ahavti as not literally mean I love. It means it's something more of like Hashem loves me. Ahavtani, you love me. And here, the Zera Shimshon, each one of them explanations. The first one was that we accept upon ourselves, and since we include other people in our davening, and we're including other people, so by doing that, automatically, we're showing Hashem, we're making that declaration. The second one is that because we're davening for other people first, we say, ahavti, I love other people, and I want their tefillah to be answered, and therefore, because I want other people's tefillah to be answered, so too my tefillah should be answered too. But it's not that I'm davening, I'm including them, I'm loving them so much that I'm davening them first, and therefore, ki yishma koli, Hashem will hear my tefillah, therefore what happens, just like the Gemara says, because I'm davening for someone else, I'll get them too. I'll get an answer. The third one teaches that what's the effectiveness of davening in tzibur, davening in community. By connecting ourselves, and I mentioned before, the minyan. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a minyan. I think there's also I think there's a power in davening in general, right? When we have a tefillah like tefillah tziburit, right? That's what's tefillah tziburit. So you can say tefillah tzibur means a minyan, literally a minyan. But let's say we at a Shabbos table. There's no minyan, but there's a nice group of people there. They're singing together, right? Or a mezuzah, right? Whatever. Mezuzah is 3 people, right? It's always nicer to have more people singing together, davening together, right? When we have Lo Aleinu, at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of davening, people davening together, and they were just saying Tehillim together. I can say Tehillim at home too, right? But saying it together with other people, our tefillot are heard, but also we all get inspired by other people's tefillah. So and by other people's kavanot. So therefore, with the power of the community is that I'm connecting myself to the community. I'm not isolating myself. I'm connecting myself, and by connecting myself to the community, the tefillah ahavti, I'm saying, Hashem, I love these people. I love this community. I love the other people that are around me, and therefore I'm connecting myself to that. And therefore, as it says, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. So all 3 of these are really taking v'ahavta l'recha kamocha and adding this idea of a responsibility that we each have towards other people. And even though, and as I mentioned before, and I think it's such a powerful and simple thing, but it's a very powerful thing, is that when we think about it, when we look at the tefillah really carefully, most times, very few, I find very few of them, even like Modani, right? That's like the first thing I say is Modani, right? Hashem, I thank you. For me, I thank you. But after that, most of the tefillah is not me. It's not about me. It's about everyone. And the idea here is that we're connecting to something bigger than us. And we have to realize that when we say that, when we make that statement, when we make that understand, and we really understand that the tefillah that we say, yes, we want other people, we need whatever we need, and we're asking for some things that we think that we need. But at the end of the day, we're asking for something that's bigger than us. So we have to be really thinking about our tefillot should be including other people, including the greater tzibur, because the greater tzibur needs our tefillah just as much as remember the Miami Boys Choir? Miami Boys Choir had the thing, we need you, we need your tefillah, right? It said each and every yid can bring the gula, that every person can bring the gula. Why? Because he said every tefillah that every person's tefillah is important. So even though we may, we think, sometimes it's a drag, or sometimes he's saying is that I accept my tefillah, and I accept the love. I have love, and I love every Jew, and therefore by me loving every Jew, I'm including myself with them, and I'm davening for their behalf as much as I'm davening for mine. So therefore, by doing that, automatically I'm saying that I want their tefillot to be answered, and I want my tefillot to be answered too. But I want their tefillot to be, I want my tefillot not to be about me. I want it to be about us, because we all need something. And we only, whether it's Barei Chaleinu, whether it's, Shover Avim Machne Azim, get rid of the enemies, right? We all have enemies that are our own personal enemies, but we also have enemies that are much bigger than us. And we all need to ask for those things. It's not just, one thing about me, right? It's not just break my enemies, because we all have things that are causing us stress, and enemies could be, according to some people, the enemies are the Yetzer Hara. Some people, it means literal enemies, right? According to some interpretations. But the point here is that we're saying is, Hashem, I want the tefillah, my tefillah to be included. And that's what the tefillah here is based on the idea of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. We have a responsibility it requires a love of other people and a love of other Jews. So just a thought I'll go back to what I started with. Not that we're done yet, but I'll go back to what started the Kli Yakar in the beginning in this week's parsha with the lavim. There's many lavim, many isurim that we have about not taking revenge. And all these different things that we're not supposed to do, lo tikom, lo titor, don't take revenge, don't talk negatively about other people, all these things. The reason why I'm repeating it is because I think A, it's very powerful, and B, it's a simple but straightforward mashal that the Kli Yakar brings. The Kli Yakar brings, he says, when we were all growing up, what did we used to do when we were kids? We used to build Lego, right? Or build with blocks. You ever play with blocks? Yeah. Playmobil? Yeah. Right, everyone did. Everyone built things like that. G.I. Joe, okay. But G.I. Joe, one of the reasons, by the way, I never had those little soldiers. I never had G.I. Joe. I think one of the reasons was my parents didn't like the fact that it was encouraging, fight and back and forth. Right? They didn't own guns. They didn't own guns, no. Having a water gun in my house was like, the first time I had a water gun, they were just like, they couldn't handle with it. Yeah. Anyway, so it was, being serious, being totally serious. Yeah, no guns, right? Right. Anyway, but kids grow up with blocks. Kids play with blocks and Lego and whatever. And what? Yeah, and yeah. So the Kli Yakar says that the reason why all these different mitzvot that Hashem tells us about what we shouldn't be doing against our fellow Jews is what happens when a kid plays with his blocks. and he builds this beautiful tower. He builds a great thing, and his father's watching him. And all of a sudden, other kid comes in and knocks it down, right? And what happens? The kid gets upset, and he wants his father to do what? You scream at the other kid, yell at him, give him a good, whatever, right? If it's his own child, and if it's not his own child, he can yell at the other parent, whatever, right? But what does the father do? He laughs. The father just, brushes it off and laughs. Why does the father brush it off and laugh? He may tell him he shouldn't have done that, but he won't really take it as, he's not like, oh my God, like he doesn't go all out. Why not? Because he said, the Kli Yakar says, is that the father realizes that's just a game. It's just a game. It's just a game of blocks. In an hour from now, you're going to find the next game that you're going to want to play. And what Hashem is telling us, and this is what the Nimshal, is that Hashem, we as Jews, we get angry at another person because we think that person is out to get us right now. So we have to do something right now to get him back. We have to get him right back. But the father, the Abba, right, in the Mashal, is telling us, it's okay. These games of, you do this, I do this, you do this, I do that. If we restrain ourselves, and that's the Chinuch, the Sefer HaChinuch says, if we restrain ourselves from holding a grudge, and really, he actually mentions the idea of pouring on the love, meaning extra, showing that person, he says you will get many, some significant amount of bracha. If you hold a grudge against someone, and you, instead of holding a grudge, you give them extra love, right? Take the high road, right?
The previous Rebbe, right, said
everyone does. I'll give you a story about a story I just heard from Rav Biederman during his weekly Dvar Torah. He said, weekly shmooze. He says that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, his son got married. This must have been 70 years ago. He says, and he got married to a Rav's, his son. That is Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's son, who used to be the Rav of Tveria. Got married to the daughter of at the time was the Rav of Tveria. So the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's son took over from him. And so at the wedding at the time, 70 years, 80 years, who knows how many years ago already, at the time it wasn't meat. Meat wasn't the main course, fish was the main course. Right? You had, just like nowadays you have meat and then you have rice and salad and whatever, those days it was fish. So they had at the wedding, they realized that when they brought out the fish, you could already tell that before they even started touching the fish, you could already tell the fish was not good. I mean, it smelled very bad. So within seconds, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach runs to the kitchen and talks to the caterer. And he says, "But don't make a big deal about it. I'm paying for the full thing. I'm paying for the whole wedding. Don't make a big deal about it. Just keep your mouth closed. Whatever happened. Keep your mouth closed. Move on." And so the caterer starts laughing, and he said, "Why are you laughing? I'm telling you what to do." He says, "No, because your mechutan came in 5 seconds ago, told me the same thing." Meaning, he says, it's like Dan Lachav's. He's saying is, we have an opportunity, right? We have an opportunity that instead of holding a grudge, he could have easily held a grudge against the caterer. Instead, he said, take the high road, right? The point here is that when we and there's many stories about it, but there are many stories, and one of the stories was about the I want to say, I don't know which Rebbe it was. There was a Rebbe in the time of the First World War, that there was, before the First World War, there was someone from one of the Jews really didn't get along. They didn't get along at all, and he would make fun of the Rebbe and whatever it was, and the Rebbe just kept on, didn't do anything, but he never said anything. And then after the war broke out and the war was over, what happened to most Jews? They came lost all their money, and whoever survived, they really had very little. The Rebbe somehow managed to survive, and he had some money, and he would send this Jew tons of food and clothing and everything. And the Rebbe's wife once came to him and said, "Don't you think it's enough? I know that you hated him or you didn't get along with him, but the only thing is," he said, "there will never be enough, because I'd rather pour more love to the person than do the opposite. So I'd rather do that." So he said, my Yetzer Hara wants me to do something, so I'm fighting my Yetzer Hara by doing something opposite of it. So it really teaches us something about what we should do, how we should be approaching people that we don't get along with, what we say about other people, right? There's a lot of these things that we think, oh, if I get that guy back, or I say something negative about him, or I, say that, tell them something, we don't know the impact that we're going to make, not only for them, right? What we say about them may cause them to lose business, cause them to, create a whole storm, but it will also harm us down the line as well. It will get back to us that we'd said it. It will be, someone will say something negatively about what we did, right? So we have to be careful.
The saying, if you've got nothing nice to say in Yiddish.
You know, what is
Good
that
job
point
is-
where, you know, the caterer sent out bad fish?
Right.
And now the person paying for it is gonna lose out, right? Obviously, he didn't wanna embarrass the caterer and he ran up and said, don't worry about it, I'm still gonna pay for it, right? But where's that cutoff like?
So that's the thing. Like, again, when we hear about these stories about Gedolim and great Rabbanim, you're like, oh, they could do it, but I don't think I could get to that point, right? But everyone has those moments of just like, I remember, I stay the story many, many times because it happened to me recently, and I still am surprised at myself that I did it. So, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to. My daughter and I, last year, she went to, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, we went to open up a bank account right here in Efrat. And we had an appointment, the first appointment. We got there on time. There was no reason for us not to be the first people to be taken. And the time was passing and no one was answering. And they said, oh, there's someone in front of us. So I said, okay, we'll wait. They said, we'll take a few minutes. We said, okay. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes passed. After like a half an hour, I'm like, listen, I got to get to work. So I went up to them, I said, excuse me, we told us we have a 9 o'clock appointment. It's now almost 10 o'clock. And then nothing was happening. They're like, okay, well, a couple more minutes. And I said, okay. Now I went to the manager. So I went to the manager. And
Where was this again?
the bank here. I went to the manager, and the manager said, no problem, we're going to take care of it. He's going to finish up his thing. I was like, listen, I really have to get to work. It's not right. So he says, okay. And then, as soon as they finished, which was like, 5 minutes later, they finished. The woman there was a brother and sister, I think it was a brother and sister, who were like they were being served before me. The woman comes up to me and like really rips me one. Like she rips me. She's like, you don't understand. We have to make all this trouble. You have to run. You have to travel. You don't understand this whole situation. Why we're here so early. And before I even said something out of my mouth, I was about to be like, it was my turn first. I had the first appointment. Like I could have easily given it back to her. And I said, I said nothing. To this day, my daughter's like, I don't know how you didn't say anything. To this day, I really, and I'm.
In front of you?
She was there. I was there. We were there 20 minutes before our appointment. We got there. We walked in. They're like, okay, we're here to take you. And then somehow, the guy was the only person there. The only teller that was there was being, somehow she got there or whatever. They said, oh, I know you, or they were. I guess they had they were there the day before, so they kind of wanted to finish up the account that they had to figure out, whatever it was. I don't know the whole story. All I know is that she gave me one. She was like she really ripped it to me. And I was really, I'm not one to yell at people, but there was definitely more me to, like, the Israeli of me would have been like,
As Ellie Stefanski would say, and 9 months later.
right? I'm telling you, I'm telling you, my daughter to this day, my daughter.
But what happened?
I don't know. I said to myself, I'm going to hold back. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say. I know. I'm telling you. I was like, the Israeli in me was trying to be Israeli, like push the line, whatever, like get my turn, right? And I was.
What happened? Did you go to work? You just skipped?
I sent my message to my boss saying I might be a little late, whatever. Of course I could do that, but it was just more about like the fact that you can hold yourself. You just have to catch yourself in that moment before, because usually the blood boils to the top of your head and you're done. It's too late before you even try to say something. And on occasion, you have the opportunity to really hold back and say, you know what, it's okay. Like, don't have to say anything. I literally said nothing. I just went, like, that's it, I did. And I was just like, that's it. And then I don't know what overcame me. I could just tell you that I'm sure that it would have been warranted, but I know that at the end of the day, what would I have gained? I've gained nothing by yelling at another person in a public place. So I try really hard. Today, it happened today. We had secured something for my son's bar mitzvah, like a vendor, about a month and a half ago. Even though it was really not necessary to do that. A month and a half ago, I called the guy that my son wanted, a certain, something, and he said, this is the person I want. So I said, okay, I'll call them like 2 months in advance, and the guy laughed at me. He's like, why are you calling me now? You don't need it. I'm like, I'm calling you now because I want to secure it. And I was like, whatever it costs, just, I'll put the money down right now. He's like, okay, great, we put it down. Today I get a call, and he's like, I'm so sorry, I have a family obligation. And I was like, of course I could have yelled at him and said, listen, I paid the money, we agreed. And he was so sweet. He was just like, I'm really sorry. Like, he was so nice about it. Of course, yeah. Money is not the issue. I don't like whatever. So I said, you know what? As long as I said, Hakol min hashamayim. That's all I said. And then I'm done. Why am I saying these things? The point is that we have an opportunity to, when we could either do something negatively, or we could say, you know what? There's a reason for it. And we turn it around when we have that moment, instead of doing lo tikom, and instead of doing tikom v'titor, take revenge, or get angry, dam l'chav zchut, and say there must be a reason for whatever it is, that other side, and then just move on.
Just to clarify, I missed the beginning. The very first pasuk you guys were working on were lo tikom.
No, the pasuk actually was, the pasuk came from, right, in this Zera Shimshon it was about ahavti ki yishma. And the word of ahavti, most mefarshim explain, the Gemara mentions, ahavti yishma, it's in Hallel. That's the Hillel. It's Kuf Ted Zayin.
It's not based on the Chumash? What do you...
No, so the Zera Shimshon's piece, right? It's part of Hallel. The Gemara, the Zera Shimshon starts his
Right, but I'm wondering where in the...
Okay, so that's what I said at the beginning at 8:45 when I got here. The Gemara, I said I don't understand why the Zera Shimshon put this here, and then I realized that in the middle of the thing it says the next line it says the Arizal says that before davening, what do you have to say? Except V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. I'm like, oh. In this week's Parshat, it says, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That's what the connection is. I didn't put it together. I was like, I can't believe I didn't think about that before. But anyway, so Hashem throws down some extra love in the middle. But the point is, what's the connection? The connection is that we have to take extra effort to love people as much as we love ourselves. And whatever that means to us, and obviously we don't understand that really, but we have to take that extra effort. And whatever we can do to give other people the benefit of the doubt, many times, there's so many different things that we can, we jump to conclusions. We jump to understand why someone does something the way they do it, and we don't understand what's going on. And since we never understand that, who was it that mentions that? The Sefer Chinuch on this week he mentions it in Velot Tatur Acharei Levavchem, I believe. But he says, since we'll never understand the other person's position ever, we should never hold a grudge. That's what he says. Since we'll never be able to, in other words, not only holding a grudge, but also dan l'chav zchut. Meaning we have to dan l'chav zchut of the other person because we'll never be able to be in their shoes. Anyway, so that's the general consensus, the general idea. I had a different Torah that I was going to go through, which is a connection between tzitzit, mishkalot. In this week's parsha, we mentioned the idea of taking. Oh, it's one of the isurim that we're not allowed to do is take. We're not allowed to take interest, right? We're not allowed to have hold an interest against another Jew. And it's one of the three times, there's many mitzvot, but the three times it mentions, don't do this, ki ani Hashem. It's one of them is ribit, one of them is tzitzit, and one of them is when we do the weights.
After also.
Right, but these are lavim. Right, he says there are three things. They're question. The Gemara asks,
because that's such an important mitzvah, and then
right. So the Gemara asks, why are these three things? Why do we mention these three as ani Hashem? It says ki ani Hashem motzi otchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, and don't take ribit. Don't wear your tzitzit because I took you out of Mitzrayim. So the question is why? What's the connection? So the Zera Shimshon has a beautiful longer piece about it, but the basic idea is that each one of those things, as soon as you and the Gemara mentions that each one of those things, that when you say, for example, how do I cheat when I cheat on a scale? What do? I shave down the scale a little bit. I put it in salt. I make it look like it's a pound, but it's actually half a pound. So when I put it on the scale, I'm charging the other person less, or charging more. Excuse me. Right. When I wear tzitzit, right? When I wear white tzitzit, it's easy. But when I wear, in the time of the Gemara, there was tchelet. But I could wear another kind of tchelet. What was the other kind of tchelet called? Kala ilan. Kala ilan was a cheap tchelet. But and a person who hangs up, Gemara says, if a person hangs up kala ilan onto his clothes, to dry it out, to make it into thread, he's already over on the idea of not wearing tzitzit. Meaning, before he even put them onto his tzitzit, he just hangs them dry, like the string on this thing, he's already showing. And the same thing with ribit. You can't. What happens with ribit? Ribit is I can't charge another Jew interest. So what's a very simple way to get around that? I give my money to a non-Jew and say, now you lend it to I want to borrow from Reuven. So instead I give it to Joe, the non-Jew. Joe lends it to Reuven, and all of a sudden I've just bypassed the whole system. So the Zera Shimshon says that these three things are very easy to bypass, but their true intention is already shown. Meaning, by the mere fact that you're trying to come up with a loophole, you've already shown us what your real intention is. And what he connects it to, he says, is that Paro, and this is a theme that goes on throughout Zerah Shimshon many times. Paro was the question he asks here. He says, "I don't understand. Paro was." Hashem said to Avram, "Your children are going to be enslaved for 400 years." So Paro shouldn't have been punished. Why shouldn't Paro have been punished? He's just a middleman, right? Hashem told him, "Paro, you're being selected." Okay, but what happened? The reason why Bnei Israel got taken out early, not 400 years, but rather 210 years, right? Why did they get taken out early? Because Paro was cruel, unnecessarily cruel, above and beyond what he should have done. And why? So how do we know that? So the point is that Hashem said, after 210 years, I'm going to kind of like basically do is 210 years equals 400 years. Meaning the 210 years, they've worked so hard, that's as if they worked 400 years. Hashem says to Paro, I see what you've done already. After 200, when you started punishing them and working them harder than they were supposed to, then I already see that where you're going. And with a non-Jew, he says, as soon as they start even thinking about it, I'm ready to judge them to what they're going. But with the Jews, they have to take action. And their actions of, I'm trying to give the money to the non-Jew so that I can charge interest. Or I'm shaving down my weights or whatever it is. Hashem knows what's going on. And you'd think that you're trying to bypass it, but Hashem knows what's going on. Hashem understands it. And He wants you to remember that just like I can identify these things of Mitzrayim, these things that happen in Mitzrayim, I can identify the real meanings. You have to remember these three things are those three things that I can also identify what your true intentions are. What's that?
I mean, there's a lot of recourse charged in this country.
Yeah, but it's done. It's called a heter iska. You're allowed to do that. The heter iska is that it's a legal way, basically, and you can ask. Every bank in this country has it. Every bank,